Okay, welcome back. So we're looking at the last paper from May-June 2022. That's paper 13. So like all the other videos as well, any questions that are from question paper 11, I'll just circle the correct answer and you can go back to question paper 11 and look at that if you still need an explanation for the answer. So question 30, that's a question paper 11 question, and answer is B. Go back to that paper, that video, if you want an explanation. Okay, so question 29. A country has a surplus on the current account of its balance of payments. What is most likely to cause the country to move into deficit? Okay, so a very simple way to think about the current account's balance of payments. There is more detail in it than this, but a simple way to think about it is that exports higher than imports. Okay, so what we're going to be looking for here is to move into a deficit. Therefore, we would need to have imports higher than exports, right? So that's what we're going to be looking for in these answers from A to D. Now in the first one, if we have a devaluation of its fixed exchange rate, what's that going to do? That's going to cause the export prices to go down and the total value of the exports to go up. So that would not move us into a deficit. In fact, that would actually increase a surplus, or increase the existing surplus that we already have. If we were to give subsidies to the exporters, again, what would happen? The exports would go up, and we can see from the right hand side that that would mean that our surplus, or our existing surplus, would increase. If we were to have productivity increases in the export industries, exact same as the other, the exports would increase, so it would just increase the surplus, not create a deficit. However, for C, if the technology in other countries gets better, what's going to happen? They're going to be more productive, and because of that, people in our country are going to buy more imports from them. So when the technology in other countries gets better, that's going to result in us buying more imports from other countries. Okay, 28 is a QP11 question. Go to that video for the explanation. Question paper 11, 2022, May or June. Question 27. When are countries most likely to specialize and trade with each other? Okay, so remember, specialization is the theory behind it, or the surrounding idea behind it, is that we can make a particular good or a particular service more efficiently than other countries can, right? So the example I've used in previous papers is regarding potatoes and rice. It may be easier to make rice in China because of the climate that they have, whereas it may be easier to make potatoes in the UK or in Ireland because of their climate. So when the cost of transportation between them is high, what's that going to do? That's going to restrict trade. That's not going to enable trade. When they have high tariffs and other protective measures, that's also going to restrict trade, because we're taxing imports from a country. When they have access to the same technology, okay, that's not going to have an effect on trade, but it's going to reduce their ability to specialize. We know that they need different climates, different technology, different access to resources in order to focus on a product that they can make, which another country can't make as efficiently. So when there are large differences in the resource allocation, that is what's going to help us to specialize. And then what we can do is, if we make a lot more rice in China, we can sell that rice to Ireland, and they can sell us potatoes because they can make those more efficiently than we can. Okay, question 26. Correct answer is D. 26, 25 and 24 are all question paper 11 questions. So C and C for 25 and 24. Okay, 23. What action is not performed by a government as part of its international role? Okay, this is a relatively difficult question. It's kind of an unusual question. It's not repetitive like the current account balance of payments questions or the foreign exchange questions or the PED or PES questions or the inflation questions, which are generally asking the same info. So all we have to do basically is think about what's a government trying to do. They're trying to look after their own citizens, right? So if they provide humanitarian aid to refugees, that is something that happens, and it's something that's happening currently in Europe, for example. Refugees from Syria or from poorer nations in the Middle East are getting humanitarian aid from European governments. They also issue visas to foreign tourists. So when you fly into China, for example, if you're from a Western country, normally you need to obtain a tourist visa before you're legally permitted to enter the country. And the government will put regulations in place where they'll restrict the movement of some countries and they'll allow the free movement of other countries. For example, if you're coming from Thailand to China, you don't need a visa, you can come straight into the country. We also know that they will impose tariffs on imports. So they'll try and restrict the number of imports coming into the country so that they can protect the companies that are in their own country. We want to switch people from importing goods to be able to buy goods domestically instead. So process of elimination, what's left is A, building offshore wind farms. That will generally be something that a private firm would do. It's not something that the government would do. Why? Because if it's offshore, the benefits that would be obtained by wind farms would not be received by the people, whereas tariffs on imports is, in their eyes, a benefit they can provide to domestic firms and domestic consumers, etc., more domestic firms, as well as humanitarian aid and issuing visas. Okay, question 22. In a country, inflation is 10% and nominal interest rates is 7%. So basically what we're saying is that inflation is 3% higher than the interest rates. Which group is most likely to benefit from this situation? So we've had very similar questions to these in the past. The borrowers, they're the people who are likeliest to increase. Why? They borrow money at 7%, so what they're paying back is 7% more money than they borrowed. But the price of money is essentially increasing by 10% a year. So really, they're actually paying back 3% less than what they would be if inflation was matching the interest rates. The employers will lose out, the lenders will lose out, and the savers will lose out. So why will the savers lose out? They're keeping their money in a bank, so they're getting 7% as a payment from the bank every year, but the price of goods and services has gone up by 10%, so they're actually still losing 3% a year. And that's the same for the lenders. If the borrowers are to benefit, therefore the lenders, because that transaction is opposite, the lenders will obviously not benefit from that situation. They're the ones who are receiving money back that is less than the increase of inflation, whereas borrowers are paying back less money, so they're the ones who obtain the benefit. And employers also won't benefit. Inflation, especially at 10%, is very bad for employers. It's going to increase all their costs, and people may be less willing to spend money on their products and services if their prices increase by 10%, for example. Okay, question 21. Why might the macroeconomic aim of full employment conflict with the aim of stable prices? Okay. So, full employment leads to higher cost of imports. That's not true. The level of employment in our country has no effect on the cost of imports. That would be Higher cost of imports would be due to protectionism measures, etc. Full employment leads to increased income inequality. That's also false. Full employment, in other words, everybody in the country having a job, is likely to reduce income inequality. And full employment leads to lower exports, so the same thing. It doesn't affect the exports, it doesn't have an impact on imports, but what it does have an impact on is it will lead to an increase in wages. Okay, and why would it lead to an increase in wages? Because if everybody has a job, it becomes harder to replace people when they want to leave that job. So if you think about everybody in the country has a job, Tom leaves his position as a doctor, it becomes extremely hard to replace Tom and find another doctor. Therefore, we have to start increasing the wages to incentivize people to come and take that job. So what's that going to do when the wages increase? That's going to cause inflation, so it's going to conflict with the aim of stable prices. Okay, question 20. What might cause a recession? So remember that a recession is a period where real GDP will decrease for 6 months consecutively or more, and a recession could be caused by AD going to the left. So what we need to think about is what's our contractionary fiscal and contractionary monetary policies. So an increase in consumer spending, what's that going to do? That's going to move AD to the right. So that's actually going to fix a recession, not cause one. An increase in government spending, again, that is a expansionary, I'll just put E, expansionary fiscal policy, and that would be designed to move AD to the right also. So again, it would fix a recession, not cause a recession. An increase in investment, again, same thing, that would increase AD to the right. Our components of AD are C, I, G, X minus M. Okay, and that's important because that's the thing that might cause a recession. If we have an increase in imports, AD will move to the left. Okay, assuming that our export levels stay the same. So remember our components of AD, C plus I plus G plus bracket X minus M. And the theory is really simple. If any one of those increases, then AD will shift right, fixing a recession. And if any of these decrease, then AD will shift left, causing a recession. So in this case, an increase in imports is M. So if exports stay the same, M will get bigger and X will stay the same. We'll have a reduction here in these components and we'll shift left. Investment is I for D. That's why AD would increase. Investment would increase, and consumer spending is C. Hence why for option A, C would increase and AD would move right. And government spending is B, as well. Excuse me. Government spending is G, so again it's another component of AD. AD would move right. Okay, question 19. A government significantly increases its spending on education and training over several years. What will be the likely effect of this policy and the rate of inflation in both the short run and the long run? Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is spending on education and training. Who spends that money? It's the government. Okay, so that means that the short run effect will be AD shifting to the right. And we said that in the short run we can fix a recession by having AD shift to the right as we increase this government spending, where we're spending on education and training. Okay, now what does that do? If AD shifts to the right, it's possible that what that's going to do, I'll just put AS here and AD, it's possible that it rises the price level, therefore it will create inflation in the short run. Okay, so over a short period of time. So what we can see here is that when AD increases, we have a starting price level here, and then we have a new price level which is higher, showing us our inflation. Okay, so we know that short run effect would be an increase. Now what happens in the long run? So in the short run, because government spending is a component of AD, it will shift right. But in the long run, it will actually help us to move AS to the right, because spending on education and training is going to result in an increase in the quantity and or the quality of resources. So in the future, what we may have is AS shifting to the right here, due to that increase in quantity and or quality. And what we'll see that can happen is the price level can actually reduce, right? So in the long run, the price level can come down, which is why C is the correct answer. We might have a short-term increase in inflation due to AD, but in the long run, AS will shift, because it is not just a fiscal policy, it's also a supply side policy designed to shift AS. Okay, in a country there is an increase in the rate of interest to prevent inflation. What type of macroeconomic policy is this? Okay, that is monetary policy. Supply side policy is not designed to shift AD, it's designed to shift AS. Trade policy is policy relating to trade with other countries. Fiscal policy is taxes and government spending. And monetary policy is the use of interest rates, money supply, exchange rates, and credit regulations to influence AD. And in order to prevent inflation, what are we going to do? We're going to shift AD to the left. So we will increase the interest rates. That is a contractionary monetary policy. Okay, 17. A government decides to increase the indirect tax on petrol. Petrol has an inelastic PED. Okay, what are to be the likely consequences? So, if I can just show you here, what we're going to do is we're going to draw an inelastic PED. So this is going to be demand, and then we're going to have our supply curves. Okay, now what's going to happen with an indirect tax? We're going to shift our supply curve to the right, to the left, sorry, because the products get more expensive, right, when we put in the indirect tax. So here we can see the increase in the price, and then we can test it using the curve, what happens to the quantity. So this is our initial quantity level, right, Q, and we can see that the price has gone up, but the quantity of the product that's being sold or demanded has gone down, right? So quantity of petrol bought will decrease. Now we need to figure out what happens with government revenue. So when we have an inelastic PED, that means that we can change the price quite dramatically, but the quantity will only change by a little bit. And you can see that in this curve that I've drawn. Price is changing here. This area is bigger than the change in the quantity, which means that people are, even though the price increases by, let's say, 20%, only 10% of people are actually no longer buying the petrol. So because of that, because the price increase is higher than the increase or the decrease in quantity demanded, government revenue is going to increase. So correct answer is B. Okay, question 16. What is not usually a macroeconomic aim? Okay, balance of payment stability, that is a macroeconomic aim. If you want to recap on these, it's the first chapter in your Unit 4. Revision notes and slides are available, and practice questions on the OneDrive. Lowering cyclical unemployment. Lowering unemployment or reaching full employment is a macroeconomic aim. And reducing poverty or redistributing income, that is also a macroeconomic aim. So just with a bit of common sense, what is the government not trying to achieve? They don't want to have a high level of funds that have been borrowed. So they don't want to borrow a lot of money, and that should be pretty common sense. Okay, 15 and 14 are from question paper 11 again, so please go look at that video if you want the full explanations for these answers. Okay, 13. Now this is a difficult question. What might encourage a consumer to spend less and to save more? Okay, so first of all, consumers, depending on whether they're optimistic or they're pessimistic about the future, they're going to behave in different ways, right, in terms of the type of policy that the government uses. So if they expect that unemployment will fall, that's a good thing for an economy, right? And if they expect that GDP will rise, that's also a good thing for an economy. So why would they spend less and save more? They would spend more and save less if they expected unemployment would fall or that GDP would rise. Okay, so we're left with two options. Essentially, we're left with the option of deflation because prices will fall, or we're left with the option of inflation because prices will rise. Okay, so now we need to think about what they provided us in the question here. They want to save more money. Okay, now why would they want to save more money? If you have inflation and they save more money, what's going to happen is that the real value of that money will decrease very quickly. So if they expect to have inflation, it wouldn't make any sense for them to save their money in a bank account because they'd be losing that money instead. Whereas if they expect that we'll have deflation, by putting their money in a savings account, they're actually going to increase the real value of their money. That's why A is the correct option. Okay, question 12. What might prevent an individual choosing a particular occupation? So basically this is common sense again, right? What might stop a person from taking a job? That's essentially what they're asking us. Would the low cost of traveling to work stop somebody from taking a job? Definitely not. That would be something that would help them to take a job. Would no risk to personal health be something that would stop somebody from taking a job? Again, absolutely not. That would help somebody to take a job. And the same thing with the wage rate above the national minimum wage. That's going to help somebody to take a job, not to prevent them. But if they have little opportunity for a career progression, that's going to prevent them from choosing a particular job. Okay, question 11. What is an outcome of a competitive market? So remember we said about a competitive market before, it's the opposite of a monopoly. So they're going to have a lot of different choice, you're going to have many buyers and many sellers, and you're going to have low prices and large choice. Okay, high prices and low quality. Prices will be low because it is competitive and there's a lot of competition, and the quality of products will be very high generally. Why? Because we've got a lot of competition. If somebody's making a low quality product, we will just switch from them as a supplier to somebody else. Profits won't be high again because of the competition in the market and the number of sellers, and we just explained why quality is likely to be high, not low. And they won't have little choice, they will have a lot of choice because of all the different sellers. So B is the correct answer here. Okay, this is a good question. Cinema has 500 seats. It raised its admission price from $2 to $5, and daily revenue increased from $800 to $1,500. Okay, what can be concluded from this? So for A, PED for cinema seats was elastic. We can't conclude that from the information. Why not? Price has gone up, right? But the total revenue has also gone up. So if you look back on your PED chapter, your slides and notes that are provided as well on the OneDrive, what we'll see is that when price goes up and total revenue goes up, that indicates to us that it is an inelastic PED, not an elastic. For it to be elastic, the price would have to go down and the revenue would have to go up. The price elasticity of supply cinema seats was elastic. Okay, so we know straight away this one is wrong, right? Why is it not elastic? Their supply level is fixed, right? They've 500 seats. So they obviously weren't using all of their seats before, but it's not going to be elastic. It's actually going to be perfectly inelastic. Why? Because the 500 is going to look like this, and they can change the price and the same quantity will be there. So they're still going to have 500 seats available here. They can't change the amount of seats that they offer, right? Of course they can move this direction left and offer lower seats, but they can't move it to the right. Their supply is limited. So definitely not elastic. And cinema's profits rose by 700. Total revenue is not the profits. Remember, we still have to take away our cost. So our total revenue minus our costs would give us our profit. But 1500 to 800 is just the sales we are generating, not the actual profit. So correct answer would have to be C. They obviously operated below full capacity before, so they weren't selling all 500 seats, right? And we can actually estimate what their daily revenue is on how many seats they were selling. Previously they would have been selling 400 seats because their daily revenue was 800 and the admission price was 2, so they would have had 100 seats spare. Now they're selling 300 seats, but they've increased their revenue because the admission price has gone to $5. Okay, this is another question from QP11. QS is the correct answer here. Go look at that video for the full explanation. Okay, a manufacturer of tinned beans mechanizes its assembly line. This increases output by 30% and reduces labor by 20%. How and why will this affect supply curve S? Okay, so think about it. Output has gone up, right? So that means we know that we have to move this direction in terms of the quantity of tinned beans, right? And labor has been reduced by 20%. So what's that? That's a cost of production saving, right? Now what happens if we're making more tinned beans, and what we know about our supply curve, that when the cost of production comes down, the supply curve will shift to the right, because we can produce more at a cheaper price. So what our curve will look like, we'll have an S1 movement here, price of the product will come down, and the quantity that's being sold or supplied will increase. So that's due to an increase in productivity, an increase in consumer demand. The demand curve would have to shift for C, and we know that it's not going left, it's moving right. Left would be if our cost of production increases. Okay, question 7. What statement about PED is correct? So everybody should know this and nobody should be getting this wrong, if I'm being blunt with you. PED measures the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Okay, it's very simple. There's no other explanation except to say, learn the formula. Okay, the diagram shows the supply and demand for a product. Suppliers have decided to produce 10,000 units and charge a price of $6. What is the result of this decision in the short run? Okay, so they're showing us here what's happening. This is our level of supply and this is our level of demand. So what we've created, or what's happened because of the price change, is a surplus. Okay, and a surplus is another name for excess supply. So we're supplying too much product, but there's not enough people buying the product. Therefore, what's going to happen? We're going to be left, or the suppliers will be left with unsold stock. Okay? A stable equilibrium price will be achieved. That's not true. We can see that it's not stable equilibrium price only if demand or supply shifts and we can move the equilibrium price. There is no excess demand. We just showed that it's excess supply. Excess demand would be down along this line, where demand would be higher than supply would be, and the equilibrium market price will increase. It's not going to increase because we're in an existing surplus. Equilibrium price is set, and that will only change by changes in demand or supply levels, or changes in the factors that affect demand and supply. Okay, question 5. China is moving towards a more mixed economic system and reducing the role of the public sector. Which economic policy measure might best achieve this? Okay, so what are we trying to do when we're trying to move into a mixed economic system? We're trying to give the market mechanism more freedom to work, essentially. So if we create excess capacity in state-owned enterprises, that would be more so of a move back in towards the public sector. Eventually we're going to try and get rid of those state-owned enterprises as we're moving into more of a mixed economy, or maybe even towards a market economy. We will encourage competition among private sector firms, however, because that's what exists with the market mechanism. That's how it works. And by encouraging competition, what we're going to do is we're going to create a greater level of choice for our consumers, or for people in our society, and we're going to reduce the prices for them as well. We wouldn't protect infant industries, and we wouldn't subsidise transport infrastructure. They would be different methods the government can use if they have different objectives. So protecting infant industries would be an economic policy measure, not if they're moving to a more mixed economy, but if they want to protect new industries that have arisen in their country. So they might use protectionism measures to do that. And subsidizing transport infrastructure might be, for example, if there's a lot of pollution that's generated from cars, and what they want to do is they want to get more people using public transport, or if they want to make productivity increase in the future, make firms and businesses be able to transport their goods quicker. Okay, macroeconomics, remember, is the study of the whole economy. The other questions have all gone through this. Microeconomics is the study of behavior of individuals, firms, and individual markets. So the output of a firm, that's an individual firm. Public goods is studied in microeconomics. Market price determination is also studied in microeconomics. Cost push inflation is something that will affect the whole economy. That is why it is a macroeconomic concept. Okay, question 3. What would cause a shift? So we're not told which way we're shifting in a country's PPC. So that means that we can shift right, or we could shift left, right? So what are the reasons why that would happen? We'll shift right if we have, if I can take off all caps, an increase in the quantity and / or quality of resources. Likewise, we would shift left if we have a decrease in the quantity and / or quality of resources. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking out for. So, prices is not taken into account in a PPC. All it does is show the maximum output of two goods in an economy, nothing to do with prices. If we have a fall in unemployment, that's not a decrease or increase in the quantity or quality of resources. It is just us using the resources that we already have more efficiently. So a fall in unemployment would mean we'd be inside the curve, and we would move to a point that's on the curve as we become more efficient and as more people start to get a job, we use our resources better. Okay. If we have a recovery from a recession, the same thing is likely to happen. We're likely to move from inside to on the curve. Okay? Why? Because with a recession we're likely to have high unemployment. So the same thing, we have the resources available, there's just not enough demand to make all the goods and services we can in a recession. But as we recover from that recession, the demand will increase, right? Therefore we will start to use all of those resources again and move back towards being on the curve. The destruction of factories in a war, however, would result in a shift, but it would be a shift inwards. Why? Factories are obviously a quantity or quality of resource, aren't they? And if we're destroying factories, we're destroying the quantity of resources we have available. So we would shift inwards and our productive potential would be decreased. Question 2 is from question paper 11. Correct answer is B. You can go take a look at that full explanation. May-June 2022, QP11. And final one. Which factor has the correct factor reward identified? Okay. The reward that we get for capital is not profit. The reward that we get for capital is interest. Okay. If we own machinery, etc., we can rent that machinery out to other businesses and they will pay us interest for doing so. The reward that we get for enterprise is profit, not wages. Remember, the enterprise or the entrepreneur, essentially, they are the owner. So they are the ones who are collecting the profit. And the reward for labor is wages, not interest. If you're just a general employee working in a company, what's your reward for doing your job? It's getting paid your salary. So the only one that's correct here is that the reward for land is rent. If we own a piece of land, what will people pay us to use that land? They will rent, well, they'll pay us money, but they will rent it from us over a period of time. Okay, that's 2022 done. I hope you find it useful.